Hi, hello, it's me again, and this is the 8th chapter of His Leading Light by Emotional Logic. And the chapter is named, Oh yeah, it's all coming together. Shoda didn't even so much as lower his pace as he just walked straight into the door to the principal's office, or rather, where the door would have been, had it not opened just in time for him to not walk into it. He didn't have the energy to play the little games Nezu loved to play to throw his visitors off. He knew how it worked, and it would be a waste of time right now to do anything else. Walking inside, he was met with Nezu, sitting at his desk, one cup of steaming tea in front of him, and another cup of hot black coffee sitting ready in front of a chair on the other side of the desk. How Nezu always knew when and who was coming to his office in time to make coffee and tea in time was one of the few things about the rat that Shoda had never managed to understand, even after having known the creature for about half of his life. But regardless, Shoda had sat down in front of the rat and took a sip of the coffee, taking a moment to close his eyes and clear his thoughts while enjoying the very well-made and very much not instant coffee in his hands again. How? So, Izuku, to what do I owe the pleasure? Nezu said after letting Shoda enjoy his coffee for a moment, a very practiced, polite smile adorning the principal's face. Opening his eyes again, revealing how tired he really was, now that he'd taken a moment and let himself relax just a bit, Shoda set the cup down on the desk and straightened up in his seat. I need your help in locating two people. The first should be quite easy, and I could possibly do it myself, given some time and the right resources. But you would definitely be able to do it a lot quicker, considering I have both his name, description, and quirk status already. The second one is a bit more tricky, as I have close to no information on him, but he's a hero, and one I would personally rather not be recognized as such in the future. Shoda stopped there, seeing the intrigued look on Nezu's face. He learned long ago that the best way to get Nezu to agree to help with anything was to make him interested and curious. If you could do that, it was very easy to make him agree, and especially when the thing the rat would be doing was get more information on the thing he was now curious about. And so it came as no surprise when the principal took a slightly too short moment to pretend to think it over before nodding his head. I see. So, would you mind elaborating on why you would like me to look into these two? It's not often one of my teachers comes in wanting to take away another hero's license. It's not often I found out a hero broke about 50 different protocols within an hour without anyone knowing about it. Shoda made no effort in hiding his sudden frustration and anger, knowing that if anything, Nezu would probably appreciate him not hiding his feelings on the matter. Seeing that Nezu was patiently listening for him to continue, he decided to do just that, listing everything he could remember at the moment. To start it off, the hero defeated a villain that was choking out a child, and instead of calling the police or paramedics after the villain was dealt with and the child was lying unconscious on the ground, the hero decided to wake the kid up by slapping him. And once he saw the kid was awake and throwing up, he decided to just take off to the police station to apparently deliver the villain to them. Shoda was getting more and more agitated as he spoke. He had thought it would be easier to talk about it all after having ranted about it to Hisashi that morning. But, if anything, it just made him more angry. The more he had thought about it, the more things he realized the hero had done wrong, and the more he wished to see this hero off of the streets. These were all things that he was responsible for teaching at UA. Ethics and heroics teacher, for crying out loud. If any one of his students had acted like this during class exercise, it would have been more than enough grounds for expulsion from the heroic course. And so, the thought that an actual licensed hero was currently walking around on patrol thinking this was an okay way to act as a hero was making his blood boil. Seeing Nezu open his mouth to speak, likely thinking Shota was done, he held up a hand to insinuate otherwise. Our hero, apparently, lacks any spatial awareness whatsoever, as he didn't even manage to notice a child throwing themselves at him and holding onto his leg before he flew off. Using his thumb and index finger, Shota went to massage the bridge of his nose as he continued. And, at the height of intellect, he told the kid to let go of him mid-flight. Apparently, the kid had to convince the hero that he might die if he let go, and so the hero landed on a rooftop just to leave the kid there before taking off again. This quirkless kid that had just almost died in a villain attack barely a couple minutes ago. His anger turned sombre quickly as Shota's story came to a close, and he remembered what came next. The voice went from loud anger to barely a whisper as he talked, but he knew the rat was going to hear him anyway. He was getting ready to jump when I found him there. Whilst angry, Shota had been looking all over the place, making eye contact with Nezu whenever he wanted to stress something important, which were a lot of times. But at the whispered part of the end, Shota was looking straight into the depth of the black coffee in the cup he was holding. Or maybe it would be more accurate to say he was looking through it. As he wasn't really taking in anything he was looking at. Nezu was nodding, tapping away at his keyboard and making a few hums here and there, but otherwise not disturbing the silence that had followed Shota's last statement. Am I right to assume this kid is the other person that you would like me to locate? Nezu asked after a few moments, not looking away from the screen as he continued to type. You said you had a name and a quirk. It might be easier to identify the hero if I find the child you're looking for first and follow their tracks. Shota nodded. Izuku Midoriya. He is quirkless and I would estimate between 11 and 15. Though, if I'm being honest, the higher number might be more wish-thinking on my part. He's quite short, with green hair and freckles. Shota hadn't missed this slight twitch to the rat's ears at the mention of the kid's name, but he elected to ignore it for the time being. If the rat knew anything, or had heard the name from another place, then surely it could only be beneficial in finding him. And so Shota would figure out what it might be later. I already found the kid's mother's social media, Izuku Midoriya, as I was doing some research after patrol last night. But I would really just like to know that the kid got home safe and see if he's getting some professional help, which I doubt, but if not, I would like to see if we could help him get in touch with someone who might be able to help him. A few more clicks on the keyboard and Nezu chirped. Midoriya Izuku, quirkless, 14 years old, born on July 15th, and attending Aldera Junior High as a graduating student this year. Shoda's gaze snapped up to lock on Nezu's. 14. He's 14. Thank God. The relief on his face was evident, but it wasn't complete. Would you be able to hack in and see if registered their absence yet? His relief as the thought of the kid not having gone home hit him once again. Nezu tapped away at his keyboard once more before, not so long after, his snout twitched slightly in a way Shoda wasn't able to get a proper read on. It doesn't seem that they keep digital copies of their roll calls. In fact, they barely keep anything digital at all. All I can seem to find is the bare minimum of information they're required to put on record. This time, when the rat's snout twitched once more, Shoda could read the very clear mixture of frustration and intrigue quite well. They don't seem to have an active surveillance system in their house either. This is definitely interesting. Taking a break from talking, Nezu seemed to scan the pages of text quickly as his paw kept scrolling up and down the page. They have a student roster here, with our Midoriya standing out like a sore thumb compared to the rest of his classmates. Oh? At that, Shoda decided to stand up and walk over to the principal's side of the desk to get a look at the computer screen. Looking at the screen, he saw each student with a headshot besides their information. The information was quite lacking, just like Nezu had pointed out. They had the grades of their previous years recorded, the names, and few students here and there had a number on the bottom of their profile between 1 and 5, supposed to represent disciplinary marks, which they weren't allowed to look at to see what they were for. To be fair, this all looked like it would be enough information if they were, as they were, a high school looking at potential candidates. But they weren't looking at the official page. Nezu had hacked into the school's computers. There should be more information recorded that shouldn't be shown to the public, but should still be there to keep order in their papers. The fact that they weren't allowed to see what the different disciplinary notes were meant for meant that the school didn't actually record their reasoning. As he looked through the students listed, he couldn't seem to find Midoriya amongst them, that is, until Nezu scrolled down to reveal him. The first thing Shoda noticed was his face, and the punch to his gut as he recognized the facial expression the boy wore as the same neutral expression he's been wearing when the people at the hospital had glared at him. The second thing Shoda noticed was the number on the bottom of Midoriya's profile. Where the other people with numbers had maybe 2 or 3, Midoriya's profile showed a total of 23 marks, and with no way for them to look at what the disciplinary marks were put there for. Shoda was at a loss for words at what he was seeing. That couldn't possibly be correct. There was no way that the hero-worshipping, timid kid he had found on the top of that rooftop less than 12 hours ago was acting bad enough at school to have almost twice the disciplinary marks of all his other yearmates combined. Seemingly sensing his thoughts, somehow, Nezu nodded beside him. This doesn't quite add up with your experiences with the child, does it, Aizawa-kun? Tapping a few keys to navigate the school's systems and see what else he might find, Nezu didn't let Shota answer before speaking again, answering for him. That's what I thought. Nezu made a show of looking over at the time, despite Shona knowing for a fact that the rat had a perfect inner clock and always knew the time perfectly. I believe you should be on your way, Aizawa-kun. Homeroom is ending soon, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe you have an ethnics class with 1C coming up in a few minutes. Shota, having followed Nezu's gaze to look at the time, only nodded and straightened himself, where he had been standing slightly bent over to look at the computer screen. I will continue to look into both the hero and Midoriya, as well as this Aldenia Junior High. So don't worry about that and focus on your teaching during the next hour. Nezu said with his practiced signature smile once again on his face as he dismissed his former student. Shota only nodded once at the dismissal and made his way out of the office. Thank you, he said right before the door closed behind him, walking once more down the ever-so-convoluted hallways, making his way to the 1C classroom for his first lecture of the day. Nezu was having an absolute field day today. He wasn't about to lie and say he hadn't been anxiously awaiting to see if a certain Midoriya Izuku was going to answer his mail or not for the past 29 hours. Ever since he wrote his reply, he was excited and intrigued, to say the least. You see, the analyst division of the support course has been his idea to implement in the first place, and he'd been quite disappointed at the lack of application during the past 4 years. It had been so exciting that there had been a moment when Nezu had wanted to just say the kid was accepted on the spot, but he had reined himself in, knowing that he should at the very least get an understanding of who this kid was before taking him on as a student. That being said, it hadn't stopped him from already categorizing young Midoriya-kun as his personal student-to-be. It didn't actually matter what kind of person the young boy was. The fact that he was interested in the course in the first place and interested enough to send a clarifying email about it to see if it was still an option really told Nezu all he needed to know. Nezu was going to break down any and all bad habits the child may have and build him back up again. He was going to mold Izuku Midoriya's mind however long it took. If it turned out to be a challenge, then that would just be fun to tackle. And if it turned out the way Nezu expected it to go, especially with the kid already interested in quirk analysis, then he would just have even more time to mold him and maybe even get to have some interesting conversations. And so you can imagine how excited Nezu was to learn that his past personal student had met with his future personal student. Not only that, but Aizawa-kun had already become protective towards the kid. This was perfect. It wasn't ideal to learn that his future student was suicidal, but then again, It was something he could use. Being suicidal, Midoriya-kun probably wouldn't have too much confidence in himself, which would make it easier for Nezu to break him down in the right ways. And Nezu would easily help him find a numerous amount of things to live for, as well as send him to Inoue-san for some therapy, of course. A lot of people somehow seem to forget that Nezu, no matter how intelligent and strategic, was an animal. He had instincts he had to follow, and he was territorial. Midori Izuku had, albeit unknowingly, already become a part of Nezu's pack, and so, for all intent and purposes, Midoriya was Nezu's, and Nezu protected that and those which he considered his. And so, learning about the hero that had hurt one of his own, Nezu was going to find out who it was, no matter how little he had to go off of. And given the way Aizawa-kun had acted, it would probably be quite easy getting help from both Kayama-san and Yamada-san as well, if not his whole staff, if he just played his cards correctly. But first, Nezu had to dismantle a school reputation and hopefully shut it down so brutally that they wouldn't ever be allowed to keep that area as a school ground ever again. Nezu knew that Aizawa-kun had been too occupied looking at the injustice committed towards the boy to see it, but it had been clear as day the second Nezu had looked at the disciplinary marks on each student. Midoriya-kun was no doubt marked down due to discrimination based on his quirklessness. And this was made even clearer by the fact that every single other student, with even a single disciplinary mark, was the owner of a heteromorphic quirk, with less than stable features. The amount of marks a student had was a clear correspondent to the degree of mutation visible in the student photo beside it. The only two students with 5 marks were a girl with a mouse quirk, big ears, whiskers, a snout, and a slightly elongated face, as well as a brown-grey coat of fur covering her skin, whom Nezu couldn't help but feel a small sort of kinship to. And a boy with what looked like a tint of bioluminescence to his skin, meaning it would probably glow in the dark, and pitch black eyes, as well as gills lining the sides of his throat. It was very clear that the school worked of nothing but shameless discrimination, didn't even bother trying to hide it, and yet it had been allowed to go unchecked for far too long. It made Nezu sick to his stomach. Now, did Nezu's decision to act on this straight away have anything to do with the fact that taking down the school would leave a certain Midoriya Izuku without a place of learning, meaning it would be all too easy for Nezu to graciously claim responsibility and ask for the third-year students of Aldera that had been most afflicted to come and finish their final year at UA, just so that he could get his personal student to come to him half a year earlier? Well, if it did, then that would obviously only be a bonus, and in no way the main motivator of the task, obviously. A chill down his back was what finally woke Izuku up, not even an hour after he decided to continue to sleep. He was now laying wide awake in his bed, with an ominous feeling that something very imminent was coming his way, and he had no way to stop it. Shaking off the feeling of what had to be just lingering remnants of a bad dream he couldn't remember, Izuku got out of bed and got dressed. Looking at the time, it showed that school had already started, and remembering his reasonings from before, he tried to go back to sleep. Izuku decided that he wasn't going to go to school, but that he might as well get something out of the day. Maybe he could go to the mall, given that this might be the only time of the day that Izuku wouldn't have a chance of running into anyone from school while looking through the new hero merchandise. Yeah, that sounded like a good idea. Then maybe he could sit down at a cafe and do some people watching and note down some interesting quirks he was seeing. He hadn't done that in a long time. As usually when he did, he ended up forgetting to pay attention to his imminent surroundings and usually ignore his quirk trying to let him know he should leave. And someone who knew him from school always seemed to show up and loudly call him out as a creep to everyone else in the cafe. Well, to be fair to himself, he probably wouldn't have gone around ignoring his quirk all day long if it didn't constantly go off, telling him to leave wherever he was at all times. Izuku is pretty sure by now that his quirk had some kind of danger sense thing, or at least it has something it wants him to do. But he was just so tired of feeling that constant pull in different directions whenever something slightly uncomfortable was happening. Now, if it could only warn him when he was in actual danger of his life, maybe then he would have actually listened to the pull. But he really didn't need to be pulled at every time any of his teachers of class or classmates were in the classroom he was heading towards at school. So yeah, no. If he was going to do that, he should probably find a place where he hadn't been before, and where no one else had had a chance of recognizing him too. Maybe he should go to a different mall. He had all day after all. Why not make his way across town and find a new mall to explore where no one would possibly know him? Izuku was aware that he was being creepy, writing notes on other people the way he was, but he couldn't really help it. The thoughts came to him in rapid succession, and the only way he was able to sort out his thoughts was to write them down. It helped that he'd managed to all but stop his muttering habit due to his fear of somehow accidentally starting to mutter about All Might. But it was still something he had to catch himself doing every now and then. Well, either way, Izuku didn't want to stay at home. His mom could come home any moment without any warning, and if she found him at home and not at school, he didn't want to know what would happen. So, taking in his backpack and filling it with pencils, a notebook, and different things he might need for whatever reason, Izuku put on his shoes that he made a habit of bringing to his room and made his way out of his window down the fire escape route lining the wall. He knew his mother probably wasn't going to see him if he just walked out of the house normally. But what if she did? No, it was easier for him to just take the window and use the path on the back side of the building to get to the streets parallel to the one he knew his mother would use. And then he could get to the train station and find out where he wanted to go from there once he got there. After arriving at the train station, having decided that would be the easiest way to not have to decide to where to go right away, Izuku was quickly regretting just that decision. He was standing there looking up at the big map, at the wall of all the different trains and where they could take him. He had no idea where he wanted to go. He had thought that he would have enough time to think about that on his way to the train station, but he hadn't actually thought about it at all. He had been distracted almost immediately about the sudden thought of the mail he had gotten the day before, that he had yet to be bold enough to actually look at. What if the mail degraded him for sending it in the middle of the night? Oh, they probably thought he was dumb for not having understood that the curse was no longer available. It obviously wasn't, considering it wasn't even an available option to apply for on the school's website. He had been pondering this the whole way. At one point, he even picked up his phone and was going to open the mail, but he didn't even open the lock screen on his phone before putting the phone away and going back to his ever-spiraling thoughts. He wasn't in the right place, both physically and mentally, to be opening and reading something like that right now. Now, he better wait until a better place and time. Looking over the map one last time, Izuku looked over at the timetable, seeing that the next train would be arriving in only 3 minutes. He decided to just take that one until he got to somewhere he recognized. Maybe he should do a bit of exploring? It wasn't often that he was able to take a trip alone like this without it being because he was doing an errand or something like that. The train arrived quickly, and Izuku walked on, immediately noticing how empty the train cart was, before realizing that it was a weekday, and most schools and work days started over an hour ago. He sat down on an empty two-seater and opened his backpack to retrieve his notebook and pencil to do some writing while he waited for his stop, whichever stop that would be. And that's the end of chapter 8. Let me know how it was. What's your thought on this chapter? And maybe if you have some pointers for me or anything, I would really appreciate some constructive criticism. If not, then I hope you have a great day or night. And yeah, that's it. Bye bye.